Welcome to Exploring Anime with Friends, a JMO for Real podcast on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. I'm your host, JMO. And let me introduce you to today's friend, Sarah, my wife and co-host.
Hi, everyone.
In today's episode, we will be exploring the world of S-Cried, a classic action anime with elements of dystopia, released in July of 2001. For the next 20 to 25 minutes, we will explore some of the early episodes and the Lost Ground. First, we'll take a look at the Lost Ground itself, the Great Uprising, and the events that have led to the setting of S-Cried. Then we will meet our main protagonist, Kazuma, and the fuel that burns the fire deep inside of him. Afterwards, we will dive into Hold, Holy, and the expectations of the mainland. Finally, we will try to analyze the main relationships that really drive this storyline. And remember, if you like what you hear today, follow us on social media, linked in the show notes below. The Lost Ground happened as a result of an event called the Great Uprising, which happened over 20 years before this anime began. During this Great Uprising, some sort of spiritual, we'll call it a spiritual earthquake, happened. It just changed everything that was there. There was a lot of devastation, and there was birth given to something called altar power. Do you want to dive in really quick with what altar power is?
I mean, it can really just be anything. There's magic, superpowers. Those words kind of work for it. For each person that gains an altar power, it's different than the next. None of them are alike.
Yeah, and it's a deconstruction of matter around in order to recreate it and alter it into a power that is customized to the individual. 1% of children that are born in the Lost Ground are born with it. Now, that might not have been a big deal back 20 years in the past, but as time has gone on, more and more kids have been born to have this altar power, and it has gotten to a point where, because of the economic instability of the Lost Ground, because there's not enough work, because there's not enough resources, it just continues to get worse, and a lot of these altar users are hired for criminal activities. And there's a lot of criminal activity that's taken place there as a whole. Yeah. It's really an area that has been forgotten. The mainland says they want it redeveloped, but at the same time, it's really a land that is just abandoned by the main country and that is isolated from the main city. Now, on the Lost Ground, there is a main city, but it's barred off. There are gates everywhere. You can't leave the main city into the wrecked part of the Lost Ground without permission, and you definitely can't get in without permission, heavy tolls, so on and so forth. It's really a very dystopian world on the one side of it, despite the fact that everything just a gate away is thriving. And it really makes you sad, because we can all think of these areas that are underdeveloped, and we can all think of these areas where poverty runs rampant, and this anime really shows that. In some ways, it's an eye-opener. Yeah. It really focuses on the conflict and on the relationships, focuses on the conflict of what are you fighting for and why are you fighting for it. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, you see these dystopian themes, and you realize that you may be able to relate something or someone, or maybe you can even relate yourself to some of the things that are going on in this story. This brings us to our main character, Kazuma. And Kazuma is a very unique... Well, talk about Kazuma a little.
I mean, you say he's unique. He's, as much as you're right, like the altar powers are unique and stuff like that, he's kind of still your standard protagonist.
I would say that he's not your standard protagonist, because he's a little more of a barbarian than your standard protagonist when it comes down to it. And again, this is a different era, because we're going back over 20 years for this one. And honestly, before we go any further, this is the anime that got me into anime. Mm-hmm. This was my first exposure to anime. Basically all but forgotten now at this point in time. But this is why we're doing this one. We're not just doing this to reveal to you stuff that you've seen before or you've heard of before. We're doing this to show you some new things, to explore new animes together. Mm-hmm. I would love for you to explore the anime that got me into watching anime. Mm-hmm. Right, let's get back on track. Kazuma is brutish. At the end of the day, he has that very might makes right mentality. His altar power reconfigures his arm into a mech fist of sorts, right?
Yeah.
That's what we would call it. And he has three parts that come off it that he calls bullets that give him an extra burst of power to really smash through things. beef smash sort of character. But he's so much more than that. If you ask him why he does what he does, he will tell you it's because he loves using the power. Alter power can't be bad if it makes you feel this good. Very cliche answers like that. The whole might makes right thing mentality. But really, when it comes down to it, that's not why he does what he does. Mm-hmm. He does it for Kaname, for the girl that lives with him, that he helps to take care of. He does it for a people that thinks that he's just being lazy. Yeah. That thinks that he's just dodging work. At the end of the day, despite the fact that everyone in his life thinks that he's lazy, useless, good for nothing, he quietly protects them all from the shadows of things that are coming into the land. Like, when he's hired for stuff, he's not hired for the criminal jobs. He's hired to rescue a guy that the kidnappers took. Mm-hmm. A guy who is in charge of the military that's hunting him and other named alter users through the show. He saves that guy because ultimately he's trying to make the Lost Grounds better and safer for the people he cares about. So at the end of the day, he gives off that really barbarian vibe, but he's not. He's actually the complete opposite. Kazuma has a big heart.
He does. That is true.
Anything you want to add to that? I know there's definitely something to add to that.
I mean, as a whole, okay, you're right. Kazuma's a little more than what I was letting on, that's for sure. He, like you were saying, he's really just a good guy. And yeah, he will use the guise of just being lazy. It works for him, and that's just who he is, and you're just going to have to deal with it, is kind of his attitude.
But at the end of the day, he does what he can to make everything better, and he does not like the fact that people are invading his area.
Yeah.
That people are looking at them as lower humans because they were born here. That the snooty rich people on the mainland are snubbing their nose up at the poverty and realizing, yes, we need to correct it and fix it. Or how about you just give aid?
Yeah, you don't have to fix it. We can fix it.
Yeah,
just
they
help
can
us.
Fix it themselves.
Yeah.
And that's what Kazuma is trying to point out. If you like what you're hearing so far, if you're enjoying the character of Kazuma, we recommend that you watch this for yourself on Crunchyroll, home to over 1,000 anime series and simulcast, both subbed and dubbed. The website is listed in the show notes. So who are people that are hunting him? The military's name is Hold. This is the military that's responsible for the alleged redevelopment of the Lost Ground. Really, at the end of the day, they're just arresting criminals and keeping the borders safe so that the rich people in the city can't be affected by what's going on out there. And a branch off of Hold is Holy. What happens when they capture an alter user and they need to repurpose them for society? They don't allow them to just live in society because want to know why? Society is afraid of alter users. Very X-Men vibes when you kind of think about it. Think of alter users as the way that mutants are portrayed in X-Men. There's so many parallels to real life. Like, there's a lot of... It is a heavier anime when you think about it. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, these alter users that are captured and that are given fresh starts have to become Holy members, the division of Hold that is for the alter users, so that they can help hunt down more alter users.
Yeah, it kind of takes an alter user to catch an alter user.
And Commander Martin Jigmar. You obviously know he has an alter, and you obviously know that he's really powerful, and he's also one of the original alter users because he's one of the few members of Holy that isn't a teenager. Characters that we're dealing with in the show are teenagers.
Yeah.
And yes, it gets revealed later on, but we're only trying to give you the introduction to it at this point in time. So Martin Jigmar is the leader. Ryuho is the one who's sent out to gather the tough alters. Mm-hmm. And his alter is named Zetsue. Anything you want to say about Ryuho and Zetsue?
I mean, they're both pretty intense. It's kind of hard to describe Zetsue without actually giving people a picture. Humanoid with no arms, but instead it's got these two, how would you describe those?
I mean, I guess you can call them ribbon-like. If you are a Pokemon fan, kind of like Sylveon's ribbons.
Flesh ribbons. And Zetsue is super fast, and that's part of what makes Ryuho so much of a challenge to go against.
And Ryuho is also kind of convinced that the alter users in the Lost Ground are all criminals and scum. He has completely bought into the narrative that they are the bad guys.
Yeah, he just kind of snubs his nose at everyone that isn't actually a part of Holy.
And particular Kazuma as a whole, because by this point in time, even early on, they've already had 2 battles. He's captured him once, and Kazuma's actually escaped the hold of Holy. He realizes that He goes from calling him his prison number to his name because he knows that this guy is his villain. When in all actuality, they're both just fighting to protect.
Yeah.
Another member is Serena. She has a power that's revealed much later on. She's Ryuho's right-hand lady, and she goes around with him. We've met Orizami so far, the chubby guy who uses watermelons as his alter power. He can do anything with a watermelon. And then there's Ilion, who's watching everything anywhere. He basically has ESP, but with like alter computer technology instead.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. I always liked Ilion.
We haven't said my favorite yet, though.
Oh yeah? Who's that? Who am I leaving off? Who am I forgetting of?
The guy with the radical good speed. Straight Cougar.
Radical good speed! Talk to us about your boy Cougar.
Oh, yeah, he's the best. He could basically, like, put an engine on anything and just make it go faster.
Okay, and that's why he's the best, because he's so fast? Like, is there anything about his personality that stands out to you?
I mean, he's incredibly upbeat, which is kind of fun, and he's I don't know, he's just kind of off the wall.
Yeah, and he always is forgetting people's names, too. He calls Kazuma, Kazuya, and Mimori, Mimering, and, like, he's clearly screwing up people's names intentionally. And he really has a really cool alter power, accelerating whatever he wants to accelerate at the cost of, well, we won't go into that. You'll have to watch a series to see that part.
Definitely. It's worth watching. It's just worth watching just for Cougar.
Yeah, totally agree.
And then there's a series that you'll meet in the episodes as this series starts to take off. Like ones like Big Magnum and the Mag Sprit Unke and the Super Pinch. But this is more getting into the heart of it. We're really talking about the groundwork today. But there's some pretty awesome battles. There's some pretty unique powers, and we definitely recommend that you watch this to learn more about all of that. We've explored the individual members enough at this point in time because at the end of the day, I'm not going to spoil this whole series. And by the way, this series is only 26 episodes long.
It's very nicely contained, yeah.
Yeah, it ends well, it begins well, it's got great pacing. Well, I'm not going to get into too much right now, but it's really well constructed. But the thing that makes it so fascinating is the fact that it is driven by the relationships. And the relationship that it first and foremost is driven by is, well, I wouldn't even say that. The relationship that is thrust on us the most is that one between Kazuma and Ryuho. We've already covered. Ryuho is doing what he's doing because he's trying to protect the mainland. Sadly, he has bought into the narrative that the lost ground is scum. And he is trying to protect. He thinks that Kazuma is someone who's acting reckless. He thinks that he's taking prisoners. He thinks that he's a lot of different things. He has a lot of misconceptions about what Kazuma is actually doing. But at the end of the day, he is trying to protect. And he's trying to gain back some of what he lost. Because he lost his mom to alter powers. He lost his dog, his best friend, to alter powers. There is an alter that he refers to as the one of lightning, with the white hand and the black hand, and he's hunting that one down because he knows that one is specifically evil. And he, as a whole, tends to think alter users are kind of cursed, that they're not welcome in society. He knows that even no matter how much he does to protect, that he will always be looked down upon because of his alter power. We kind of explained that same exact thing with Kazuma earlier in the show, didn't we?
We did.
They're literally the same exact character.
Two different sides of the same coin.
On opposite sides. And the whole thing, the whole rivalry between them is the misconception that they have about the other. Kazuma thinks that Ryuho's a snooty rich boy who doesn't care about people. Ryuho thinks that Kazuma is a thug and criminal who doesn't care about people.
Yeah. When
at the end of the day, they both care so much. And I'm not going to spoil too much later in the series, but you can't keep secrets forever. And when they both basically find out that they're being duped for as long as they have been, a lot of people pay the price. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the relationship between Mimori Kiryu and Ryuho.
She lived in not the Lost Grounds, like the city part of the Lost Grounds. And it was then that she met Ryuho. And I feel like it was kind of like one of the things where their dads kind of talked in the background. We're like, hey, let's pair these two up because they're the same age and they can be good together. And I think Mimiri picked up on that before anyone else did. And she was cool with it, I think. She eventually went to go study, I believe, in the mainland. She knew he was an altar user. And she just kind of clicked with him. And he kind of clicked with her, too. But that 7 years apart, Ryuho just changed from, like, the young, almost naive kid to the much more severe, I'm doing this way kind of mentality that he kind of gains.
And she keeps on trying to learn more about the Lost Ground. And she is realizing that she's onto something. These people aren't the scum that the mainland paints them out to be. Mm-hmm. She's realizing that at the end of the day, they're just trying to help each other and survive. And when she brings it up to someone, she's called naive.
Yeah.
And she's called misled and, starstruck and whatever. When the truth of the matter is, she truthfully understands more about the insiders than anyone else on the mainland. And she's trying to redeem Ryuho and get him to see what's really going on. She comes to Holy to restore. Initially, she comes to Holy to see the boy that she fell in love with when she was younger again. Mm-hmm. But then while there, she realizes she's there to restore the system and bring Ryuho back.
Yeah.
So much that is done, so many of her actions and so many of his reactions really just help take the story to the next level. Mm-hmm. And this is the important relationship of the story because everything changes when she starts to get through to him.
Yeah.
And that's when we really learn about what's really going on. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so, and the next, and obviously we talked about Mimiri and Ryuho, and we briefly mentioned a girl that Kazuma takes care of. Her name is Kaname. Anything you want to say about Kazuma and Kaname?
It's interesting because Kaname almost views Kazuma not just as a brother figure, but as a husband. Well, because Kaname will go and help the other villagers with the laundry and all that sort of stuff, and they're like, "Oh, one of yours." And pretty young, she's younger, but that there's nothing creepy going on. He's not like a predator or anything crazy like that.
He kind of views her as the girl he's taking care of.
Yeah, definitely. But they have an okay relationship. I like them. They're cute together. When they're older, especially, I bet.
And she has some dreams, too.
Yes.
And I think this is a point in time where we do want to spoil a little in the future.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
She has altar power also, and her altar power allows her to remain connected to Kazuma when he's going through hard times. Mm-hmm. So she has dreams about the battles. She has dreams about the aftermath of the battles. Mm-hmm. And she thinks she's just having dreams about this epic hero when she doesn't realize it's a mental link with the one she cares for the most.
Yeah.
So, and that plays a very key part in the end game of the story. Now, we already covered the main one, and the main one that the anime wants us to look at. Talk about the most important relationship. Kirishima and Kazuma. It feels like it's the most important one early on. About your boy Kirishima.
I like Kirishima. First episode, when you're introduced to Kirishima's just like, "Hey, Kazuma, let's go get to work. Woo! Cool side guy. Nice." He's not just a guy that's trying to find Kazuma a job. He's actually a friend of Kazuma and actually cares for Kazuma and Kaname and good altar users that are in the Lost Grounds.
Yeah. And he brings them together. He gets the altar users jobs. He unites them against the mainland when the mainland's invading. He has the information. He connects the people. And he always comes to Kazuma first because he knows Kazuma is the guy.
Yeah.
You want to... He is the well-connected guy. Maybe call him a crime boss, but what he does for good. Mm-hmm. So really when it comes down to it, he is the guy who always one step ahead of the lawmen for the longest point in time. And he is able to bring income and information to the people of the Lost Ground. So Kirishima is a very important character to the series. And he has no altar power. He has no nothing.
Yeah.
He loses a vehicle in some comical way or another. You think he would just stop buying them and start going on foot.
Used.
Lightly used, brand new. It's kind of the same thing in the Lost Ground.
That's fair.
At the end of the day, no, he's a very focal part of the story. So, anything that you want to say in closing thoughts about Escride?
I mean, it's honestly a really good one, and the fact that like some people don't like the long-winded episodes, like it's no near as long as like some of the animes out there. So the fact that it's limited to 26 episodes and it's got a cohesive beginning, middle, and end just make it great.
100% agree. For me, this is actually a top 5 anime of all time, and I get that there's nostalgia that plays a factor in there because it's not as good as some of the other all-time great anime, but we're not talking about it in relation to all-time greats. We're talking about it in relation to favorites. Sadly, it did not stand the test of time. Barely anyone knows what it is today, but you know what? You know about it now.
Yeah.
And these 26 episodes are on Crunchyroll, and you're going to be able to watch that whole thing and enjoy a piece of anime history. And the nostalgia for me that goes along with it, who knows, maybe you'll watch it now and then watch it 10 years from now and you'll enjoy that nostalgia too. But I was so glad to see that it was on Crunchyroll so that we could rewatch it again, and super excited to see it there. So once again, today we have looked at Escride and the Lost Ground, the Great Uprising, and the poverty that just engulfs the people who are sitting there. We got to meet Kazuma and see what really drives him, really what motivates him, and what type of character he is, and how he isn't what he appears to be on the surface. We got to look at Holy and Ryuho and the other important members and see what really drives him, what drives them, and how they envision making the Lost Ground whole again. And finally, we got to look at these close relationships. The Kazuma, Ryuho, the Mimori, the Kirishima, the Kaname. We got to see how these relationships really drive this series and make it a series that is worth watching. I hope you had as much fun listening to the Lost Ground episode of Escride as we did, and consider watching this anime.
So if you like what you heard today, make sure to listen to us on Apple and Spotify. All of our podcasts are there. All of the J-Mail for Real podcasts are on there. Check us out on social media and interact with us there. It is linked in the show notes. Until next time, this has been Exploring Anime with Friends, a J-Mail for Real podcast. Let's explore together.